Hello and welcome to episode 117,
17.
I
Literally
believe.
2 minutes ago, Sarah.
Oh, what is this? Some sort of professional outfit? What do you expect? We are Radio Gorepress. I'm your host, Sarah. Joining me as always is my co-host, Phil.
Hello.
How you doing, Phil?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to talking about this film.
I feel like we've been talking about covering this for years, and I don't know why I haven't pushed harder for it, in all honesty.
I think now's as good a time as any. Now's a better time than any, really. It is, after all, the season.
It is the season. So we are, in fact, covering 2007's Trick or Treat. Which is a funny one because we just did a guest spot on the Twin Peaks podcast and we talked a little bit about it on that show. So we've kind of already discussed it in the past fortnight, which should have primed us for this show. Let's hope.
We'll see.
You're looking confused. Oh no, don't leave me hanging.
I'm fine. How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm pretty stoked actually.
I know you said we want to kind of like get the episode moving a little bit more than we usually do, but that was very abrupt.
But you don't want to leave me left out. No, I'm good. I'm stoked about this week. I'm really stoked. I left it until today to rewatch the film because I wanted it to be as fresh as possible. Honestly, I needn't have bothered. This is probably one I could have done cold. I've seen it a lot.
Watching it, and I suddenly realised I knew this film verbatim.
Do you? Have you seen it a lot as well?
No. This is you.
Oh, right.
Speaking on behalf of you.
Okay, well, spoiler alert, skip to the end. I love this movie. But yeah, so 2007's Trick or Treat, directed by... Are you going to take a stab at his name or should I?
Michael Doherty.
Do you say Doherty? Right, because I always say Michael Doherty.
I have no idea.
But, I mean, it could be like Enough and Tough. It could be Michael Doherty. For all we know.
Ooh.
Damn it.
Ooh.
Maybe we should have checked that before we started recording. Michael Doherty?
I've got no idea.
So
let's just change it throughout the episode.
Okay, interchangeable. I like that idea. So he made a student film in 1996 called Season's Greetings. I believe he was at NYU Film School, which, la-di-da.
Fancy
Schmancy. And I believe it... Right, I'm going to hold my hands up and say I haven't actually seen Season's Greetings. Have you?
I haven't, no. But I'm aware of the significance of it in relation to this one.
Yeah, apparently it was the first incidence of Sam. But it was animated, I believe.
Okay, interesting. Like, in, like, what sort of animation is it?
Oh,
Cartoon?
now you're interested. Now I'm talking your language.
The animator is curious about animation. I wonder why.
Right. Before we get too deep into this, do you have a synopsis for us?
I do.
Excellent.
My phone's just locked itself. So there we go.
Good fucking timing.
Literally looking right next to me, keeping an eye out. Do you have a synopsis? My phone goes dark. Great. Love it.
Good fucking work. Phil's phone.
Interwoven stories demonstrate that some traditions are best not forgotten, as the residents of a small town face real ghosts and goblins on Halloween. Tales of terror reveal the consequences of extinguishing a jack-o'-lantern before midnight, and a grumpy hermit's encounter with a sinister trick-or-treater. That's it. That's the synopsis.
That's not the greatest synopsis. I mean, it's not inaccurate.
I was like, yeah, that'll do. But you're right.
It doesn't sound like it doesn't give away just how fun this film is.
Okay, let's try this one. 5 interwoven stories that occur on Halloween. An everyday high school principal has a secret life. That's a spoiler.
So
that's not.
Synopsis 1, synopsis 2, cut short. It was that bad.
I mean, let's just leave it at. Let's leave it. Hopefully people have seen it already. If they're listening to this episode, yes. They've seen it already.
Exactly. This is merely a formality at this point. We assume everyone listening has already seen it. If you are new to the show, however, we will absolutely spoil this motherfucker. So this is your warning.
Can't talk about a film for an hour and a half without spoiling it.
I mean...
Do you want to try that sometime?
No, I was about to say I could, but we'd probably go on more tangents. But that sounds challenging.
Very true.
That sounds very challenging. No, we are a very spoiler-heavy podcast. The whole thing works on the presumption that you have seen the film. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't, go away, watch it.
Watch it. Come
straight back and listen to two idiots talk about it for an hour.
Yeah.
Or that's mean. One idiot and the idiot's friend.
1.5 idiots.
Are you half an idiot?
I'm about to say we're not going to know which one's which.
Well, I'm clearly the whole idiot. Come on. If you are a regular listener, that's not a shock. What's the other half if you're only half an idiot?
Sleepy.
That's fair. Can I be a whole idiot and 100% sleepy as well? Or is that not allowed?
Wow, that's a lot of stuff in you.
It is. Maybe this is a conversation we should have later.
200% of a person.
That's not a thing! 100% is the maximum! Anyway, so this film was it was made in 2006.
Yes.
It was supposed to be released in 2007, but it wasn't. There are a few theories as to why. I believe it's Warner Brothers.
Okay.
Who distributed the film, or who produced it anyway. Well, Bryan Singer produced it. Gross. Less said about that, the better. But yeah, it was supposed to come out in 2007, and one of the theories is that I think maybe Saw 5? One of the Saw films was supposed to be maybe 4. I don't know. I don't know how Roman numerals work. Okay.
Saw V.
I've already introduced myself as a big idiot. I don't know Roman numerals. Saw came out the same year, and I think they didn't want to pit the two films against one another.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I think they thought there might be some sort of box office friction there.
I mean, I guess if both were released around Halloween, then yeah, I guess so. But they're very different horror movies, aren't they?
See, this is it. This is something we've touched on in a few podcasts in the last couple of years, and it's not so much of a thing that horror movies are released seasonally anymore.
Yeah.
Having said that, there is a glut that's come out this month. But I think studios have now realised, in the past kind of 5 to 10 years, that horror movies will make money whenever you release them.
Yeah.
It's just more normies go to see them at Halloween, I guess.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's Halloween releases are taken because until recently, like you say, there have been very few kind of big horror releases, right? In terms of a film that is, and so you get a few scattered throughout the year, and so therefore there's plenty of room for horror movies to be released other times.
Yeah,
so if you've
absolutely.
got one coming out in Halloween, there's the kind of mainstream viewer is only going to go to see one of them. Because,
true. Yes.
They don't. I think audiences don't have the same appetite for horror as they do something more kind of mainstream, I suppose, or generic.
Something starring Adam Sandler.
Yes.
For example. I
definitely don't have as much of an appetite for something starring Adam Sandler as I do horror movies.
That was the first thing that my brain plucked out of thin air. No, you're right. I think the pandemic has obviously confused things even further as far as releases go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess when this was intended for release in 2007, it was definitely more the understanding that horror films were kind of allotted one time of year.
Right.
So I guess that makes sense. And it was kind of sat on a shelf for a while.
Which is kind of dumb, because I think if any film is a Halloween film, it's Trick or Treat.
I know, right?
Not Saw ?
Saw some letters. I don't know. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think that's probably why it sat on a shelf for a good while, because you couldn't really release this at any other time of year and have it make a lot of sense. Definitely a seasonal one. But yeah, they shunted the release to 2008. That didn't happen. So it wasn't until 2009 that it saw the light of day, and it still didn't get a theatrical release. It was straight to DVD at that point.
Oh, that's a shame.
Isn't it?
That's a real shame.
This is on my bucket list of films I would like to see on a big screen.
Yeah, it's definitely one that is, because it's not that there's a lot to see in this film.
There is, and I think it would be enriched by being surrounded by other fans of it.
Yeah,
just that kind of vibe that you get.
I love it.
With the right sort of audience.
love being in an audience of horror movie fans.
Right? Just that collective experience. You can't really substitute it, can you?
Yeah,
I think this is such a fun one. It would be ripe for that sort of viewing.
Yeah.
So yes, bucket list. Maybe one day we can organise a Radio Gorepress screening somewhere.
I'm down for that.
We can have a word with one of the local screens. Plans.
We'll see how that goes.
So, before I go too much further, I've made quite a few notes.
Okay.
They are very free-form notes. I did spend far too long trying to figure out the exact chronology of this film, so I do want to have a lengthy discussion about that later.
Go for it.
And I would quite like your input, because I'm still not 100% on everything. Yeah, I do have some random notes. First of all, much like a lot of films that we've covered this year, it's been a good year for us, actually. We've done some crackers. I have made no secret about my love for this film. I have a tattoo of Sam on my leg that's been there for several years at this point. I have quite an extensive collection of Sam memorabilia. However, I've always sort of seen it, despite my love for it, I've always seen it as a bit of fun.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, but as such, I would give it, I think I have given it in the past like a 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah.
Because as much as I love it, I still see it for what it is.
Yeah.
However, like I was saying, much like a lot of films we've covered this year, I think assessing them with a much more critical eye for the podcast has given me even more of an appreciation. So I think it's sort of elevated it to a 4 out of 5 after this viewing.
Interesting. Looking forward to hearing what it is that...
What? I have to justify that?
Yeah.
God damn it.
You've introduced your premise. We're like 10 minutes into the start of the show. You've got to argue yourself now, and then we'll get a conclusion at the end.
I have to argue it. Are you going to provide some sort of rebuttal of why it's not deserving of a 4 out of 5?
That's how essays work, Sarah.
Oh, I didn't agree to this.
You have your hypothesis, you present your argument, and then you write your conclusion.
My hypothesis is that Trick or Treat is really good. The end. So, I have also made no secret of the fact that I love John Carpenter.
Yeah.
I think John Carpenter is probably my favourite horror director.
Uh-huh.
I think he's just, up until the mid-90s at the very least, was one of the most consistently great directors.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't until... Do you know what? I really like Vampires. Vampires is not a good film, but around 1998, I would say, was the tipping point, perhaps.
Uh-huh.
And I hadn't realised until this viewing and until reading some of the trivia around this film just how many nods to John Carpenter there are in this.
Okay. Interesting, because I picked up on a few of the kind of nods to horror movies as a whole, but nothing specific.
I'm going to get to that too.
Okay. I'm sure you are.
But yeah, I hadn't realised until this viewing and upon doing some more research that Brian Cox... Well, I read in one place that Brian Cox requested that his character have the physical look that he does.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of it, I don't know how to verify that. I don't know whose decision it was, but the heavy prosthetics and the greying hair and kind of like the elongated nose was all designed to make him look as much like John Carpenter as possible.
I can see that as a him decision.
Yeah.
I think he's an actor that he takes his role seriously, right?
Hey, do you know what? I really, really like Brian Cox.
Same. He's
done such a variety of roles, and without meaning to sound cruel, he's not got the face of a leading man.
No, I'd agree.
But he's so much more than a character actor to me. He's taken on some really varied, like, meaty roles over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And Black Widow. No.
Is he in Black Widow?
Am I making that up? No, I'm confusing him with Ray Winston.
Oh, God, no.
They suddenly merged in my head, and I'm like, wait a minute, no, hang on.
Are we going to have to take a detour into Ray Winston's horrific Russian accent in Black Widow?
Let's save that for another time.
Who signed off on that, Philip? Who? Would it have made that much difference if he was just Cockney?
I just can't. Yeah, I'm still reading at the fact I confused the two.
It should have been Brian Cox. Oh my God! Can you imagine? He would have done a far more convincing Russian accent. I'm sure of it.
I'm sure.
But yeah, he's done some great stuff. Like LIE was a really kind of... It's not a role that many actors would really want because it doesn't paint him in the greatest light. He was in a film called Red, which was an adaptation of a Jack Ketchum novel.
Okay.
That no one ever talks about, but I absolutely love. It's such a good little revenge tale. He's done a bunch of really interesting stuff. I recently saw him in a film called Strange But True. And again, he was this sort of, is he a villain or isn't he kind of role?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if he strikes me as quite an intelligent man who, maybe it's his agent. I don't know. Maybe he's just got a really good agent, but he seems to make very good, interesting decisions for the most part.
And I not to be patronizing or anything, but I think it doesn't feel like he feels films are beneath him. Yeah.
I agree. He's like this, for example. This is just a bit of fun.
Yeah, and who's in the X-Men movies. He's equally at home being in a very serious, he's a Shakespearean actor, right? He's a very traditionally educated actor, traditionally trained actor, and yet he does do more fun, silly roles, and I really appreciate that because I think it shows an enjoyment of just the process of acting rather than
absolutely
the getting caught up in the pretension of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think if I was an actor, his career is the sort of career I would dream of. And actually, Dan and I have a witch-themed Halloween movie fest this weekend.
I hear.
And The Autopsy of Jane Doe is up on the docket. Yeah. So, speaking of Brian Cox, very excited about that one too.
He has been in a fair few horror movies in his time.
He's done a lot of genre work, yeah.
He was in The Ring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the other one that jumped to mind. I had none other listed.
But he's one of those actors that's been in far more than you realise until you look at his resume and it's oh fuck, man, you crop up all the time.
Uh-huh.
But he kind of has such a distinctive look, but still manages to get lost in the role.
Yeah, for sure.
And I admire that a lot. But yeah, so his physicality was modelled on John Carpenter in this movie, which I thought was a cool little tidbit.
Yeah.
Obviously, in his segment at the end of the film, the line, "You've got to be fucking kidding me," ripped straight from The Thing. Anna Paquin's character is called Laurie, after Laurie Strode.
Yep.
There is a scene on one of the streets where a 1958 Plymouth Fury drives by in the background as a nod to Christine. It's great.
I think it was Billy who's dressed up. He's got like red wild hair and dungarees and a stripy top on. And it's one of those really the references are there if you look for them, but they're not kind of like,
they're not in your face.
No, that's what I really like, because I think we kind of touched on it with I think in the Cabin in the Woods episode, the kind of like grey area between kind of pastiche and parody and farce. And, I think there are films that do go, hey, look, this is that horror movie, nudge, nudge. But they're done in this film with a lot of subtlety.
Yeah, it's more sort of their way of honouring these films rather than like the wink, wink, nudge, nudge in your face aspect.
I think individually you wouldn't even notice them, but because it is a Plymouth Fury and because he does have Doug Reese in a red stripe and because there is a character called Laurie, he suddenly realises that, this is very deliberate. This is a very deliberate choice to nod to other horror movies.
And there's a couple of Stephen King references as well. And the soundtrack references House on Haunted Hill, the remake, of course, and The Lost Boys.
Yeah.
The less said about Marilyn Manson, the better. But obviously,
of course, it was his cover of Sweet Dreams, wasn't it?
It is a great cover, and that's again one we briefly touched on when we guested on Twin Peaks.
Yep.
I don't know. That song is haunting us this week for some reason. There is. I don't think it's the same version, but there's a cover of Cry Little Sister from The Lost Boys. Both are playing behind the werewolf scenes.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So I don't know if there's some relevance there. Pet Sematary, obviously, with my absolute favourite, the old Achilles tendon.
I knew it'd be that.
From under the bed. Ugh. Apparently Rhonda's house was modelled to look like Carrie White's house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and in the segment with Brian Cox, there is a gumball that bounces down the stairs on its own, and that's supposed to reference the Changeling.
Changeling, yeah.
Which, interestingly, we may be covering very soon.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, we have spoken about that, haven't we? Yeah. But no, I love it. Like I said, it's... these things on their own aren't. It's not like they're echoing. Apart from "You got to be fucking kidding me," it's not like they are echoing lines verbatim or making it, like I said, in your face. They are. They're so subtle that you would almost be forgiven for not noticing them.
Oh, and I haven't. I've seen this film a lot, and most of this stuff is kind of like some of it I'd picked up on before, but definitely not all.
Yeah. And I think that's all the better for it because they come across as Easter eggs more than anything, kind of like nods to these films that reward horror fans and people who are familiar with the genre.
I was about to use the exact same word. It is like a little reward for rewatches.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
I kind of love that because to me, I don't know if there's any truth to it, but to me that sort of speaks volumes to the director and the fact that they're not phoning it in. They clearly give a shit about the genre.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Because like I said, it's not just like they've kind of looked up, best horror movie deaths or best horror movie lines and just
like anyone could do that.
Yeah, for sure. But like you say, it's because it's these subtle moments that, I mean, particularly something like Changeling, which isn't necessarily on anyone's kind of top 10 list of most influential horror movies.
I mean, it's often referred to as like a lost classic.
Yeah.
And I'll hold my hands up and be honest and say I didn't watch it until about 3-4 years ago.
I've got it on DVD and I've seen it once.
I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I kind of love it when that happens. I wish there were more lost classics that I haven't seen. I really like when that happens. And it's so rare when you're so kind of just... your understanding of horror films and your what's the word I'm looking for? Your knowledge. When you kind of are so entrenched in the genre as we are, you end up with almost like an encyclopedic knowledge. And so it's almost impossible to find such seminal films like that you haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
So when you do, it's like a really special moment.
Or at least don't know kind of through osmosis, like I did with, like I've done with The Omen, for example.
The Omen, yeah, exactly, where you kind of had a sense of deja vu through a lot of it. Yeah. And that's what I think is so cool about this film, because like you say, they're not... they could have done the obvious choices, like have a "Here's Johnny" moment or something like that, and they choose to go the less trodden path, I guess,
For sure.
and reference maybe lesser known things that they clearly care about and love.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
No, me too.
Also, interestingly, throwback to last week, the always check your candy.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, oh yeah.
The same mythos.
Marilyn Manson and razor blades and candy are haunting us.
So many throwbacks. I hope Marilyn Manson isn't haunting me, Jesus. So, like, Marilyn Manson is basically already my sleep paralysis demon. Jesus Christ. So before we do a bit more of a deep dive into each segment, I want to hear your thoughts on the chronology of this film, because as much as I love it, like, I'm not confused by this film. I think it's fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah, and it takes steps to actually position itself. Throughout, you can see the other characters in each segment, interacting somehow from a different perspective. You can clearly,
or just like passing them in the street or something.
Like, break down the order if you are paying attention.
Although
that said,
whilst doing research, I did find a couple Reddit threads of people just going, "What's happening? Who's the pumpkin boy?" So maybe it's not quite as self-explanatory
it's
as
Jack
we thought.
Skellington's and Sally's baby.
Right. Now's probably a good time to give a quick shout out to the real MVP of Halloween, Little Sam, who I don't know, but I suspect is probably called Sam because Samhain is spelled Samhain.
No, I think. Well, yes, but I think
that's always the assumption I've made.
That's 100%. Ironclad proof that it's Sam Hain and not Samhain.
It's Samhain.
Why would he be called Sam if it was pronounced to?
Well, you want him to be called Sal.
Sal. Right, Sal.
No, that's awful. But I love how he came to be. Basically, Michael Doherty, whatever your name may be.
Doherty.
Sure. Does it? Get it to a vet.
At least we can go definitely wrong. We can't go we can't go definitely right, but we can definitely go definitely wrong.
We know what to rule out. I just have so much time for the fact that he got to thinking about the holidays and was just like, well, Christmas has Santa. Easter has the Easter Bunny. What does Halloween have? It doesn't really have like this notable iconic figure that you associate with the holiday. Maybe I should create one. And I've never wanted to be friends with someone more because, oh my God, yes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously Charlie Brown gets referenced in the film. Charlie Brown is an asshole. I second that kid. In fact, that might be one of my notes. But obviously, Charlie Brown and we didn't really have it over here. It's more of like an American tradition.
Yeah.
But the Great Pumpkin. And his feeling was always like Linus kind of waits for the Great Pumpkin and it never appears because it's not real.
Yeah.
So why don't I create a thing? And he came up with Sam, who is by turns the cutest and the creepiest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of genius that they got a kid to play Sam. Because apparently Michael Doherty did toy with the idea of having like a congenital dwarf maybe. But he wanted that kind of cutesy, clumsy, I think he described it as like puppy dog way of moving.
Yeah.
And it does add this sort of, I don't know, like the naivety of it does add a level of creepiness.
Yeah, well, I think it also nods to the season as a whole better.
Oh,
because,
yeah, where you get to release your inner child.
Well, yeah, like it's for not to kind of talk Halloween down, but like you say, it's...
Are we going to have words right now?
No, I'm saying I'm not doing it. But like you say, it is arguably more, inverted commas, childish. Like, you grow out of trick-or-treating, right?
Oh,
I mean, you should.
mean,
I want free candy. Give me free candy. But
if it weren't for the fact that I don't like speaking to other human beings, I would be knocking on all my neighbours' doors.
But yeah, so it does kind of, and then you have all these kind of like horrific costumes, and then there's the dichotomy of the fact that it's become quite family friendly now, when actually it was quite a serious kind of pagan event, kind of hundreds of years ago, and so there is this kind of like cute but also creepy thing that's been going on for Halloween throughout its entire existence.
Yeah, there's almost like a real dichotomy there.
Yeah.
That was really kind of impressed upon me as a child. Obviously, I've talked quite a bit about my religious upbringing. And obviously Halloween was less of a thing when we were kids.
Yeah.
It was still celebrated, but not nearly to the extent it is now. It's definitely been creeping over in increments from the States.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Double thumbs up.
Give it. Like, all we need are just Spirit Halloween stores
Everywhere.
to open up now. That would be the dream. But I distinctly remember really desperately wanting to go to a Halloween party. And I wasn't allowed. What I was allowed to do was go to an All Hallows Eve party at the church.
Oh.
And I went as just the saddest looking clown you could ever imagine. And I don't mean like a sort of Pierrot sad clown. I just mean like the worst clown. Like, I basically was wearing just my own regular dungarees, and I think maybe my mum had done my face paint. Oh my God.
It sounds like a Roald Dahl book, doesn't it? The worst clown.
The saddest clown. So that was kind of my only real exposure to the holiday as a kid.
Yeah.
And I don't know if, much like a lot of what my mum deemed questionable media was banned in my household, I do wonder if my love of things like Halloween and horror films is just me overcompensating now.
For what it's worth, I mean, I never got into horror movies when I was younger. I wasn't told not to watch them.
Oh, they were taboo, so I was desperate to see them.
Yeah, like, I can see why, but I think they just never appealed to me, and so my like horror fandom awakening didn't happen till I think it was like my GCSE, so like when I was 15, 16. And then we watched a horror movie when I was at like a sleepover with friends.
That's how it starts.
Suddenly, like, the thrill happened, you know?
Yeah. We've all been there. I think almost everybody listening can probably associate with that feeling.
Their first time.
Yeah. We all remember our first time. But I do wonder if there's this little sort of bratty part of me that's just like, I'm nearly 40, you're not the boss of me anymore, Susan. I can watch all the horror that I want.
I hope so, because that's adorable.
Maybe
your inner child is still raging.
I think so. I think it's subconscious, but she's still in there somewhere. But yeah, so we now kind of inadvertently have this token of Halloween in the form of Sam.
I mean, I guess you're right. Like, there's plenty of kind of icons that you associate with Halloween, you know, like things.
But they're more sort of vague, like witches and black cats and things like that.
Like maybe the Headless Horseman, for example. But it's more. They don't represent the idea of Halloween.
No,
in the same way that like Father Christmas does for Christmas. You know, so I can see
for Santa Clausmas.
Yes, Santa. Yeah, exactly.
I believe it is known.
Nope, that was a pen. Ignore that.
Disaster.
Yeah, so I can see why like he'd want to make that. You know, it never really occurred to me. You know,
but this is it. Like it. In hindsight, it's kind of so obvious that it shocks me that nobody had done it before. Like, people must have had the idea, but not been able to pull it off, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to, like, I've never, is Pumpkinhead a Halloween thing? I've never seen it, but that's, you know.
Philip!
What?
I'm
sure there are worse, there are more, like, culturally significant films that I haven't seen than Pumpkinhead that you can get
Pumpkinhead Pumpkinhead is kind of like a weird revenge horror almost.
Okay.
It's hard to describe, but I do not associate that with Halloween.
It's just because, a creature with Pumpkinhead.
It. Yeah,
like,
I associate it with Lance Henriksen.
Pumpkinhead. Okay.
I don't know why that springs to mind. I get Alien, for fuck's sake. But welcome to my brain. So yeah, there isn't really anything else that fills that quota. And I'm so happy that it's Sam.
Yeah. Okay, so
because he's the best.
Question. Do you prefer Hessian Sack Sam or Pumpkinhead Sam?
Hessian Sack Sam.
Yeah, that's the right answer.
Right, I didn't realise there was a potential to get this wrong. Oh wow. If I'd known there was more pressure, I'd have paused.
I fully agree. I was thinking that myself, but
I think both are great. I think actually the design of him with and without the sack head is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, for sure.
But I like the element of mystery.
It's the ambiguity, isn't it? Because again, like it's that, it points to the same sort of thing that Coraline was going for.
Yeah.
In that like button-eyed, evocative of like a kind of a child's toy, for example.
Yeah. Like an anthropomorphized thing rather than an actual person.
You've got that mystery of it being...
Or humanoid.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like, you've got that mystery of it of not knowing what it looks like underneath, and therefore it kind of looks cute, but it's a bit sinister. But then when the mask's off, it's like, oh, this is just an angry child,
I do fucking love that reveal, though. I still think he's cute without the sack head. I have the masks of both.
In a different way, though, maybe.
I have the masks of both, the Trick or Treat Studios ones, and I was so mad when I realised how big the under the sack head is, because in my head I was just like, wouldn't it be cool if I could put the sack head over that one? But no such luck.
Whack whack.
They made the under the sack head bigger than the sack head.
Missed a trick there.
I know. Sad trombone. So, with that said, I'm circling back. I want your thoughts on the chronology.
Okay, in what sense? Like, because I would not be able to tell you a kind of event to event. Right. So we're going to piece it together right now. You and me. Let's do this. Let's do it.
So I started making notes very confidently, and then a couple of things happened during the film that I've tacked onto the end. So we need to piece this together between the two of us.
Uh-huh.
So, my notes. The opening shot, the very first shot that we see, is Rhonda going home.
Uh-huh.
Pulling the cart behind her with the pumpkin in it.
Yep.
She's almost hit by a car full of people, which we know, because we've seen it before, is the female werewolves.
Yep.
So that signals that the dead bus zombie kids are on the way to Mr. Krieg's house.
Uh-huh.
Sam attacking Mr. Krieg is happening in tandem with Mr. Wilkins burying Thurman Merman in his garden. Given that we see the couple at the start on the street at the same time as we see the teacher during the big Halloween parade on the street, we can assume this happens before the werewolves seduce and kill the teacher, which I assume is happening concurrently or just after the woman that is killed by Sam. So basically, the couple, the rowing couple, the woman who disrespects the rules of Halloween, is the first thing that we kind of see. I'm going to just say that straight out the gate. The beginning is the end. Yeah. But then a couple things that I tacked on after that were the rock quarry kids knock on the teacher's door after he kills the kid. So before they go to the rock quarry and taunt Rhonda. But when they're at the rock quarry, Rhonda hears the werewolves.
Yeah.
So those two things are happening in tandem. So basically, to sum up, everything is happening at the same time.
I'm glad we came to that conclusion together.
And it's a very complicated timeline.
I love it though. So I was thinking about this when I was watching it. So obviously they could have done the film in chronological order, like some events maybe happening at the same time, but they could have just played it out. However...
But they didn't. They went Pulp Fiction with that bitch.
They did. But I love it because it kind of gives this sense of like Eternal Halloween. Like the film
I like
opens
that.
and they're already taking down the decorations, and so you're kind of led to believe, wait, is this the start of the film? And they're taking down Halloween decoration. You know, just throughout, you never get a real sense of what time it is in during the Halloween night.
Okay.
And to me, it just makes the whole film seem really timeless in terms of the progression of it, because it kind of starts at the end and then plays out in weird orders throughout. It just makes the whole thing like it really makes it difficult to pin down whereabouts during Halloween it's taking place.
Yeah,
you know?
And I think it sort of adds to that kind of magical fairy tale quality that it has as well.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot. Like the cyclical nature. I like that.
It's not necessarily that it's... I mean, you're right that it does kind of start at the end, but...
Yeah, we circle right back, don't we?
It's just not... It's just constantly having, like, the rug pulled away from your feet, because it's like, well,
this happened already. How is this person alive again?
Here they are pulling, kind of putting away the Halloween decorations.
Yeah.
But then in another, kind of 20 minutes later, whatever, there's a Halloween party in full swing. And it's like, what is time at this point,
I like that.
And that is something that could not be achieved if you played it through chronologically.
No. And I think one of the reasons this works so well and why it's my absolute favourite anthology is because it was directed by one person and because it's so tonally consistent. And if each segment had been handed off to somebody else, which was the initial plan, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yep.
Could have gone a very different way.
Yeah.
But I think it would have ended up just being more like a typical hit or miss anthology and not like a cohesive film. This feels far more like a kind of a creep show, old school, like Halloween type anthology rather than what we've come to expect from them.
And that was actually why I really enjoyed the kind of opening and closing sequences, in that they start around the idea of comic books, because it really hammers home the idea of like spooky tales, like they're a bit pulpy, a bit kind of like cheesy fun,
bit silly,
but it ties in the idea of these being stories, individual like stories, and it really kind of bookends the film well,
Yeah, and I think if it had gone like a regular anthology and it had been sort of stop start, and there hadn't been the crossover, the stories hadn't been interwoven and just been standalone, it just wouldn't be as enjoyable. I don't think.
I guess there's like, because I was trying to think about what is an anthology, because there are like your kind of ABCs of Death, which is like, here is 26 short films and they have little to no relation to each other.
Yeah.
There's the tiniest wraparound, but that's it. Then you've got your like VHSs, which is...
I kind of put those in the same bracket.
Well, I think VHS had more of a concrete wraparound, and
I guess so.
They are kind of like... I mean, I'm talking like a sliding scale here.
Yeah, the very vague conceit is the same, in that they're sort of could feasibly have been a found VHS tape.
Yeah. Then you've got your like Southbounds, which is...
underrated.
I enjoyed Southbound. Yeah, definitely. But the kind of like story hands off to each story hands off to each other. And you get the feeling there is this cohesive world that all the characters are kind of existing in. But the stories themselves are still very separate, because it's like there is that physical handover where the camera just decides to follow another character instead.
Yeah, and there's no crossover beyond that.
Yeah. Then you get Trick or Treats, which are again anthology movies, still just as much of an anthology movie as ABCs of Death, but they are just a bunch of interwoven stories that feel really cohesive. It feels like almost like an ensemble movie, in that
you couldn't easily chop the film into separate shorts.
No, exactly.
You could with other anthologies.
Because each kind of event affects another, and you kind of need the context of another event happening in order to know what's going on. See the bigger picture. Yeah, exactly. That's probably a good place to start maybe talking about the segments by segment. Yep. Which I feel like we should do. So obviously the first thing we see, which it turns out is the last thing, which is the rowing couple. Like this isn't much of anything beyond setting up what to expect for the rest of the film. I think it's the perfect sort of short, sharp way to firstly kind of introduce Sam. Secondly, introduce the notion that the rules of Halloween are to be respected and obeyed on punishment of death by Lollipop in this scenario. And also it's kind of like straight out the gate an indication of how silly it's going to be. I think it's kind of the perfect way to set up the whole film without an extended sort of sequence. And it also follows the same rules as most horror films in that you get the cold open with people that you may not return to, a quick death, and then you move straight on to the characters you might actually be following. Which is why it was quite surprising that there was a recognisable actor in Battlestar, Dollhouse, yeah, like seeing Tamo Pennicat. Dollhouse. Yeah, Tamo Pennicat. I was like, wait a minute, I know him. I'm so sorry if you just heard me open my bottle of rum. I'm drinking banana rum. Ooh, I had that. Funnily enough, I had some of that the other day, and it's amazing. I want it. The Dead Man's Fingers. I don't know what the brand was, but banana rum. This is Dan's. If you're listening, bill me. I just finished it. Just kidding. Love you. Yeah, I was surprised to see a recognisable face. Actually, Leslie Bibb as well. Okay. I would argue that she is probably one of the most famous faces in the film. Really? Yeah, bar Brian Cox. Actually, Dylan Baker's been in quite a lot of stuff as well. But Anna Paquin. True, but like, name anything she's done since True Blood. Since True, okay. Not since. Exactly. I could name a bunch of things she's done. But she... When was X-Men? Was that before or after True Blood? It's probably around the same time. There probably wasn't that much between the two, especially if Bryan Singer was involved in both. Yeah, for sure. Before the rumours came to light. Yeah, so I guess there are actually quite a few famous faces in this. Well, semi-famous faces. Yeah. And then we move on to Mr. Wilkins. What a twat. Just what a grade A knob. Right? But done excellently. Oh, he's brilliant. Apparently, Michael Doherty's description of him is that he was aiming for a combination of Norman Rockwell and Norman Bates. And they fucking nailed it. For sure, yeah. That sort of initially wholesome, but then, oh, hang on, this has gone wrong. Yeah, I don't have kids. Phil, as a parent, please don't take parenting skills from this man. What the hell? Thank you for your advice, Sarah. If you didn't already know that. I was watching it and thinking, you know what would be really nice to do? I really enjoyed that, even though like it's surprisingly dark for a film of this tone, I think. But I love the fact that they not only combine, as we said, like the always check your candy urban legend with, again, as you said, sort of that pulling the rug out from under you, like, who is to be trusted? He seemed so wholesome. Oh no. And then the second kind of twist of like, oh, his kid's in on it. His kid's a tiny psycho too. Shit. And then the tie-in right at the end when he's burying Thurman Merman from... Is it Bad Santa? I always call that kid Thurman Merman.
And I'm so sorry, he does have a name, but he's forever Thurman Merman in my head. When he's burying that kid, and then we sort of get a glimpse of something not quite right at Mr. Krieg's house next door, which I thought was such a cool tie-in. Also, how cute is this dog?
Yeah, Spite.
Shout out to that dog. But again, like, fun, doesn't outstay its welcome, nice, short, sharp, very in the spirit of Halloween. And then we move on to the next one, which is... Remind me.
Oh God, I was waiting for you to say, because I had something in my mind.
Oh, we'll say it. I'm the one that's drinking.
Was it when the werewolves were introduced?
Well, it kind of skips back and forth with the werewolves because we see them shopping for outfits, and they sort of drop hints about it being Laurie's first time, and there's a bunch of kind of threads that they leave throughout their segments about her being the runt of the litter, and like a lot of clues. Yes, I think you're right. I think they're shopping for their fancy dress outfits. And fun little fact, the little kid who is known in the script as Peeping Tommy is actually Quinn Lord, who plays Sam. Because they wanted to give him some FaceTime.
Bless him.
Imagine being that kid's parents.
I was Sam in Trick or Treat. No, you weren't. He had a mask on. You got no way of proving it.
Imagine being that kid's parents, though, and reading the scripts and going, well, he's got a sack on, so nobody will know it's him. Oh, you want him to be the pervert child as well? Sure, why not? Add that to his CV. I hope that money went into some sort of fund for Quinn Lord. Oh, stage parents. Anyway. So
werewolves.
Go on.
Then what?
Yeah, well, it kind of cuts back and forth because then we sort of get a glimpse as well of Mr. Wilkins. Obviously, we know he's going to the parade because he references that when he's talking to his son. And then we sort of see somebody in a kind of Dracula outfit with fangs on who's attacking a woman, obviously later to be revealed as him. What an absolute nutjob.
Well, I love the again, that's another kind of subtle nod, the idea of like kind of vampires versus werewolves has been a thing for the longest time, and again, you know, you don't realize it until the twist when you find out kind of about the pack, but again, just nodding to that.
I'm gonna say it
and preempting it. What?
Still a better love story than Twilight.
And they didn't even fall in love.
That meme will live on through me. I'll make sure of it. Yeah, I thought that was really nice because obviously, again, his victim kind of bumps into the couple from the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
On the parade on the street. Kind of shows them seeing this woman clearly kind of pleading for help, potentially bleeding. I guess, I don't know, the assumption is she's wearing a costume. And they just sort of brush her off. But I quite like that because it kind of cements the morality of the film a little bit. It's like, oh, well, this woman was just murdered at the beginning of the film because she didn't like Halloween. Oh, she was a piece of shit? Fine. I'm okay with it. She left a woman to die on the street. Well, that's what you get.
Yep. It's only fair.
Do you know what I mean, though? Like, when I say that, like, I think it seems like a strange thing to say about a film like this, but I think it actually does have a very warped moral compass. And I think that's intentional because obviously Sam is driven by a desire to protect Halloween. He's not bad.
He wants the traditions to be enforced.
He does. And I really like that. Now,
okay,
I want to talk about the Rock Quarry Kids.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you why this film made me cry today.
Okay.
This is going to get a little bit personal, but until recently, obviously I've seen this film a lot and it had never really occurred to me. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with autism. And a few months ago, my friend Rebecca sent me an article about Trick or Treat and about how the understanding within the autism community, autistic horror fans, I guess, very like however niche you want that to be.
And there's 5 of us.
Yeah. Is that Rhonda is quite obviously coded as being autistic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she's referred to as a savant, isn't she?
They literally call her a retard.
Mm-hmm. I was avoiding that, but yeah.
I'm just quoting the film. I hate that word and everything it stands for. And not just because it was used as a specific insult for autistic people for a long time. It's horrible, and I'm very glad that's kind of been stamped out. But yeah, they do refer to as that and an idiot savant at one point, which again is kind of one of the stereotypes, isn't it? Largely thanks to things like Rain Man.
Yeah.
But it hadn't necessarily occurred to me until I myself started getting more into that frame of mind and kind of trying to dissect my own diagnosis and what it all meant. And I'm kind of amazed it hadn't occurred to me, actually, because not only is it, as soon as you get in that mindset, it's quite obvious. But also I see her as being kind of one of not only the few female representations of autism on screen, but one of the few kind of positive representations.
I was going to say, like, obviously coming at it from a more neurotypical perspective, I would say she was well written as someone who, like you say, is coded autistic, because
she wasn't 2D. She wasn't two-dimensional, like a stock character.
She didn't have over like tics or missing social cues or like all the kind of cliche things you find.
She wasn't Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory.
Right? Yeah. I think she was, for want of a better word, odd. But
yeah, absolutely.
She was perfectly well written,
She was eccentric, but she was quite articulate. She info dumped on them when it came to the origins of Halloween, which I very much appreciated. But my heart fucking breaks for her.
Yeah.
When they try to scare her and she ends up sobbing. And honestly, I was in absolute floods of tears watching it today because it's fucking shit when you're a bit different and people bully you and make you cry and like they sense weakness and target it. But I absolutely love, and even before this line of thought, have always loved that she ultimately comes out on top. I
Literally.
I really like that. But I think it's really, there's some really nice touches, and this is why I think it's scripted really nicely. She's so nice to the other kids, and she just wants to be accepted, and she's so respectful of Halloween, which I think is so key. Even the point at which they're kind of descending the elevator down into the rock quarry, and she says to that other boy, "Don't blow the candle out. You're protected if the candle's lit," kind of thing. She knows the rules.
and that's not just like modern day Halloween. That's OG Halloween, where the kind of jack-o'-lantern was said to protect people from just angry spirits.
This is it. Like when they're walking to the rock quarry, she's kind of talking about the Celtic origins of the holiday, and like she clearly knows her shit. And then after everything kicks off, and she sort of effectively abandons these awful bullies and leaves them to their death. There's that really, really lovely moment where she kind of ascends the rock quarry, and then as she's walking out, her and Sam just like clock each other. It's like, yeah, as you were. I love it. I think that's such a nice little moment. He's just like, yeah, she knows what's up.
Yeah.
And carries on. I think that's brilliant. And I think that whole bit is really nice because it kind of speaks to a very, like, kiddie horror. I mean, you could argue that the whole thing is it's not suitable for children. I don't mean it like that.
Let's make it clear right now.
No, this is a 15 certificate for a reason. But but just like the story that the bully is telling about the kids on the bus, who this mythical bus driver, who could he be? This story about how he was sort of paid by the parents to effectively dispose of them. It's a horrible, unthinkable story. But the way it's told and the visuals, it's very sort of reminiscent of that kind of the campfire tale mentality of things that we grew up with, like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yep. No, Goosebumps was going to be my go-to.
Yeah.
Like maybe not that
kind
of serious of a topic to cover, but just the attitude, like you say.
The same vibe.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then obviously we find out what happens to the bus driver.
He gets a dog.
He does. He gets the cutest dog on earth. The end. Well, before that, actually, let's talk about the werewolves. So, did you know where this was headed? Had you twigged that it might be werewolves before they started transforming?
No. I mean, I'm trying to remember because I've seen this like a couple times now.
It's really difficult to remember how you felt the first time, isn't it?
I think I could tell something was up.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have gone for werewolves, I don't think.
I don't think I guessed
I think
werewolves.
it's so rare to see like a pack of female werewolves. They're always traditionally male.
You don't really.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things in pop culture that I can think of. Obviously, the most prominent probably being ginger snaps.
True. Yeah.
But otherwise, like you say, almost always male. So yeah, it definitely wouldn't have been my first thought. I think they pull it off really nicely, though.
Yeah, they do. And I think they keep the ambiguity as well really, really well, because...
Yeah, up until like the final moments.
Even mid-transformation, you're like, something's going on here.
Yeah.
Like, because they start off growing fangs, right? And it's like, okay, well, maybe they're vampires. And that would make sense because he was dressed up as a vampire, and then, he's the one that's got kind of caught by them, and they're the real vampires. And
I'd have accepted that and still been happy, I think.
Oh, for sure. But, just the execution of it keeps you guessing. Because I think they get the fangs and, like, yellow eyes, and, you're never quite sure until kind of almost the transformation is complete.
Yeah.
It's a really neat kind of way of executing it.
I like that a lot. Apparently the effects were done by the same team that worked on the Underworld movies.
Oh, okay. They know they're vampires and werewolves.
They do. They do. Lycanthrope experts. Yeah, and then obviously we make it to the end and we see what happened to the bus driver, who is now, was always Mr. Krieg. Did you twig straight away? I think... So I watched this with Dan last year and he didn't think it was immediately obvious that Mr. Krieg was the bus driver.
Yeah.
I think if you're watching very carefully, obviously there's a very short clip of him. So when the bus sinks, you see him sort of come out of the water. You hear the wheezing. You see the scars on his face, or the cuts on his face rather, and his hand touches a rock and there's a ring on it. So there are definite kind of visual cues that would lead you to believe he was the bus driver. But I don't think it's like massively obvious.
No, and I these sort of films, if a film isn't kind of portraying itself as a mystery, as a bit of a...
Yeah, you don't try and second guess it.
I don't try and second guess it, actually. This is a film, to... use a overdone analogy, like it's a bit of a roller coaster in that it's spooky and fun and scary and thrilling, but it is what it is, and you just enjoy the ride rather than thinking deeply about it, or at least that's how I felt about it. And so it didn't occur to me to think, oh, how is Mr. Krieg? How does he fit in? Because we don't really get a sense of him fitting into the wider story apart from just existing.
He's just a cranky neighbour.
Yeah. And again, to point back to like the whole Goosebumps thing, that idea of like the cranky neighbour with a mysterious past is quite a cliche. It's a very, very not overdone per se, but like it's a thing, right? He's the guy that will kind of keep the ball that's thrown over into his yard.
Yeah. No, he won't just keep it, he'll pop it.
For sure, yeah. Yeah. Like that character is such an archetype.
Yeah.
And so given his position within this film, it's kind of easy just to gloss over that and think, oh, it's just part of the Halloween kind of vibe they're going for, right?
Yeah. He's the guy who doesn't have the pumpkin out front because he doesn't want children knocking on his door.
Yeah.
Relatable.
Yep.
Is what you're saying. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean, though. I mean, on face value, it's not a film that requires very much thought. Which is why I'm surprised we've got so much out of it, because, like I say, it was a 3.5 out of 5 to me. As much as I love it, I'd kind of perhaps unfairly written it off as a bit of fluff. And the more we talk about it, the more we delve deep into this, the more I'm just like, this is a really well-made film.
Peek behind the curtain, Sarah. I have 7 notes.
Go on. Oh, do you?
7 notes. That's like, I knew I'd be able to talk about it, but just watching it, and again, it's probably because of the fact that I wasn't second guessing it like I kind of mentioned, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And again, it's not to discredit it, but it's not like Donnie Darko or it's like notes coming out of my ears.
I'll be up front and say I had a page of notes before I even watched the film.
Well, maybe that's why I was a bit lax in making mine.
Well, Sarah will pull up the the Slack.
Yeah.
I also love during the final scene where we see Mr. Krieg punished for his disrespect of the holiday. He is obviously saved by a candy bar. But prior to that moment, we see Sam peeling back his candy bar. And it hadn't occurred to me until that moment that he'd obviously been trick-or-treating at Mr. Wilkins' house, who had put razor blades in his candy.
Well, I think, don't you see him? I think there's a scene...
You see him knock on the door, like after the rock quarry kids knock on Mr. Wilkins' door.
Yeah.
Sam's basically behind them.
Yeah, I love that so much. Like, it's just this like kind of group of kids, and they're clearly having fun. Yeah. And they go, and there's just Sam standing on his own. Like, obviously he was there throughout, and you don't notice him, and then he's just standing there on his own. It was just such a cute kind of reveal.
I love him. But I just love the commitment to connecting each of the segments. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and again, like it goes to show how much deliberation has been put into this film. You know, because again, like, you know, it could have been an anthology movie where it played out in chronological order, and it was chock full of like, hey, this is The Shining, hey, this is Night of the Living Dead. You know, but actually they play out of order. They have really subtle nods. They, you know, he's taken great steps to be very deliberate with how this film is directed.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to underestimate the world building that's gone on.
Yeah, and particularly for the tone as well, because it is quite a throwaway. You know, apart from the kind of excessive blood and guts, you can kind of watch this alongside the Goosebumps movie. Yeah. For example. You know, in terms of tone, pure, like, alone. But, like you say, considering it like that does it a disservice.
I think it can, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Or considering it just for that, I think.
Yeah. Cool. I have one little tidbit about what could have been.
Okay.
So I read a short interview with Michael Doherty. So Trick or Treat originally was supposed to be produced by Stan Winston. He was so invested in the project that he was the first person to try and get it made, years before it actually was. But he wanted to do it more like a typical anthology with 4 different directors.
Okay.
Himself, Toby Hooper, George Romero, and John Carpenter. They all said yes.
Okay.
Okay. But so Michael Doherty goes on to say, unfortunately, nobody in Hollywood wanted to make Trick or Treat at the time, so they wouldn't finance it. Some studios even claimed that no one wanted to see horror movies with vampires, werewolves, or zombies anymore because they were too old-fashioned. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. That blows my mind, like, what that film could... For all our talk of, like, oh, I'm glad it's, like, a cohesive film. Imagine an anthology movie with separate sort of sections, separate chapters, directed by those four.
I mean, those three and Toby Hooper.
Yeah, well, yeah. You're right.
Do you know what? I'm still really happy that it worked out the way it did. There's a part of me that's sad that we don't get to see what it could have been. But it could have been shit.
Yeah, you're right. I think this film does a really good job of kind of capturing the magic of Halloween.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, if memory serves, John Carpenter and Toby Hooper worked together on Body Bags, which was an anthology, which was very, like, pretty mediocre. And I've got a film called Two Evil Eyes, which is sort of two kind of hour-long movies, one of which is Dario Argento, one of which is George Romero. It's shit. They're both shit. So, like, I think it's one thing to go, oh my God, this could have been great. But it could have been awful.
No, you're right. It's fair.
It could have absolutely swung the other way.
I think it would have been a lot more by the numbers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it would have been so disconnected.
Because even if it was executed really well, even if they'd all brought their A game, it would have missed a lot of what makes this film special and different from other anthology movies.
Definitely. And there isn't a moment during this film where I'm anything approaching bored.
And it's so 2 hours long, isn't it, as well?
I think it's like an hour and 45, maybe.
Okay, maybe I'm thinking of another film.
But it's over an hour and a half, which is kind of considered the standard for that sort of film, isn't it? And it's so strong from start to end. Like with any other anthology, I have favourite bits, and I have bits that I didn't really care for. I can't say that about this. I just love it from start to finish. So I think for that reason, I'm really grateful it worked out the way it did.
Do you have a favourite segment?
Yeah, Sam and Mr. Creek, obviously.
Sam, that's fair.
Yeah, every scene with Salmon. Apart from when he's, like, peeping Tommy.
Yeah, of course.
That's gross.
I think mine was the rock quarry.
Okay.
Just because that whole, like, going down to the quarry later, like, it's such a... Because I don't think I've ever been to an actual quarry in real life. They exist in this kind of space of not... Obviously, quarries are a thing, right? But they just... Yeah. They're such a...
Oh, yes, they're real.
Of course. But they're kind of such a go-to location in...
Yeah.
Kind of the goosebumps of...
Yeah.
You know,
or like Stranger Things.
Yeah, oh, for sure, yeah.
Stuff like that.
And It as well. You know, they do occupy this very kind of classic family horror space.
Yeah.
And just that coupled with the kind of like creaky old lift and the jack-o'-lanterns grinning out of the darkness and the mist, it's just very... it's really evocative of a very particular kind of like subgenre of horror.
Yeah.
And they do it really well.
It's definitely got a good sort of creepy campfire tale vibe to it.
Apparently the costumes from that were actually inspired by real costumes that had been made by sort of kids with mental disabilities.
Oh, wow.
Like there were some photos that were taken of a bunch of kids who had kind of similar conditions that had made their own costumes.
So I read a fact and I didn't repeat it because it's not true. This is apparently why I'm going to doubt all IMDb movie trivia from now on.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's false. I think that's probably true. But however, the trivia does in fact say that all of the actors on the bus had learning difficulties or physical disabilities in real life. And that's not true because one of them is Richard Harmon, who's in the 100.
Oh, really?
And he has no physical or mental disability that I know of. He does, however, have at least one of his parents who's a casting director, which explains most of his career. And that's all I'll say on that.
Okay. Well,
take everything with a pinch of salt.
Take what I just said with a pinch of salt then. Apparently it does name check the specific photographer who took the photos, so
they do look like they've got a real vintage look to them.
Yeah.
Like they could have been sort of handmade costumes from another time.
Like all these photos from like the 1930s of Halloween costumes, they whether it's just the kind of black and white photo quality, but they look far and away more terrifying than anything I've seen.
100%. Right. So there's a thing in England. Look it up. If you want to be terrified, look up the hoodening.
Okay.
Which sounds like you know what it is, do you?
I think so.
And there's
it's one of those creepy. Yeah, we've been to one.
We did. We went to the hoodening, but it was like a modern one at a brewery.
Yeah.
Not quite the same thing. There's also a Canadian one, and I can't remember what it's called. But basically, there's a holiday around, I believe it's Halloween, where you sort of dress up in the most hideous thing you can find from your house and go and terrorise your neighbours. Canadians are so weird.
Folk traditions are weird.
But they're so creepy. You can tell Canadians started off as English people. Right?
Yeah, I can see that.
You can see their origins with their weird fucking customs. And their obsession with the Queen. So that's about all I've got in the way of notes. Have you got anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think the photographer I mentioned just now is called Ralph Eugene Meatyard.
Okay.
His surname's Meatyard.
Meatyard?
Yeah.
That sounds horrendous.
I know. But I think that's, if memory serves, who inspired the kind of costumes of the kids in the bus.
I could believe that. They look pretty cool. Very vintage.
Yeah, for sure.
So, as we always do, what are your final thoughts on this movie? Would you recommend it to anyone?
Oh, and to anyone.
Final question. Would you, going forward, respect the rules of Halloween?
I mean, I respect the rules of Halloween always anyway.
Correct.
But
good answer.
Halloween's great. Halloween's the best.
It's my Christmas. I love it.
I mean, I must say Christmas is my Christmas, but
Christmas sucks.
We differ on that one. But no, I don't think I'd necessarily recommend it to anyone. I think it's enjoyable for everyone, but I think you need to. You will get something more out of it if you are familiar with the genre and the kind of concepts that the film's playing with. You know,
I would agree with that.
I know. I think I've enjoyed it more this time around.
Okay,
kind of
because you were looking at it more with a critical eye, or
I think so. I think it's still, like you say, it's still just as kind of throwaway's a bad word, but.
No, but it is. It is a bit of fluff.
It lacks substance.
Or it can be.
Yeah. But that doesn't. Sorry.
I was just going to say, but I think we've proved that you can get a lot out of it if you want to.
For sure. Oh, for sure.
Or I hope we have.
Yeah, and I think that all the better for it because it's one thing to be. It might be throwaway, but it's very well executed.
Yeah,
and
I think
that
so.
stands for a lot, actually.
Yeah,
because
I think
there's an artistry to it, you know.
Agreed. I think the love of the holiday and of the genre kind of is very evident in every frame. I think this is clearly a film that was made with a lot of love. I mean, just the fact that Michael Doherty made the short film in 1996 and then 10 years later he was still so passionate about the project, that he made a feature-length film. I think that speaks for itself. I think it's a film that stands up to repeated viewings. I think the more I see it, the more highly I think of it, because it's a rare film that I just don't get sick of. So I think for that reason, it scores pretty highly. Final question.
Okay.
Because you're a Christmas person and I'm a Halloween person. Okay. Who would win in a fight, Sam or Krampus?
My head just went Sampus.
No, unacceptable. You can't truncate everything. Stop it.
I would say Sam.
I would also say Sam. Krampus has brute force and size, but I think Sam has intelligence and speed.
And he can detach his hands and they can crawl around like in the Addams Family.
And he's made of pumpkin and he can reassemble himself, so...
True.
Suck it, Krampus.
And our final thoughts, suck it, Krampus.
Well, I don't know about you, but I've had a ton of fun this week. I was stoked to cover this film, and I think... I hope we've done it justice.
Me too.
So if you're still listening, massive thanks from everyone at Radio Gorepress. We are on social media if you want to come and find us. We're going to start scheduling shows for next year, so now is the time to get your suggestions in.
Yeah.
If there's anything you've really wanted us to cover, let us know so we can add it to the list.
And it makes it easy on us because we don't need to think.
Yes, anything that makes that easier. Very welcome.
We've just been talking amongst ourselves, like, what should we do next year? I don't know what. I can't think. Nothing's jumping to my...
My brain is pudding. Make the job easier on us. If you do want to support us, if you like what we do, if you like what you've heard, the best way to do that is to share us on social media. It's to like, subscribe, leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. We are, of course, on YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, and all of the good ones. And the bad ones. We're on all of them. We're everywhere. You can't escape us. And with that, I'd like to say stay spooky and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.